Eric, deliver us from evil. They said it was a horror movie, but it's more than that, isn't it? How would you describe it?
Definitely. It's a bit of a genre mashup. I probably wouldn't have done it if it was just a straight-out horror film. It's really a mixture of, a police procedural thriller about a really interesting guy who happens to be a real person who finds himself in the middle of a horror film.
You know this lady?
She's one of my charges.
One of your charges? What does that mean?
I'm a Jesuit priest. Can you tell me exactly how she was behaving when you first saw her at the zoo?
Like she was nuts?
And how did the movie come to you?
I read it and was immediately intrigued by the central character of Ralph Saatchi, and when I found out he was a real person, was further intrigued. It was just a really, really well-written story, but it had layers and ideas within the story that were extremely interesting in terms of guilt and redemption and just a lot of really philosophical issues that you don't quite often get in a horror story.
Did you have to go back and read Ralph Saatchi's book that the script is loosely based on?
Yeah, I had a look at Ralph's book. I mean, it's always helpful, more just to get a sense of his voice rather than the context of the stories. It's always an unusual thing when you get to meet a real person that you're going to portray, so any sort of homework you can get to prepare for that's helpful. And it was kind of fun to research, because most of what we know about exorcisms and that subject matter is just through horror movies. But to actually really immerse yourself in the kind of cultural, religious side of it was a lot more interesting. It kind of doesn't matter what your belief system is. There are some people who are truly suffering for whom exorcisms can provide some kind of relief. So that side of it was very interesting, but at the same time, for someone who's very sceptical, it kind of challenges you.
And do you have some scepticism, or are you a believer now in that supernatural?
I don't think it's as simple as believe or don't believe. I've definitely had my mind open to variances within that, is how I'd put it.
Why'd you go visit him at the zoo? He had a message for you.
Playing a New York cop is something you've wanted to do for a while?
It was on the bucket list, I guess, as a kid growing up watching American cop shows. It was a lot of fun, and we got to shoot on location in the Bronx, and so to finally do that was a bit of a dream come true.
Last week, an alleyway off Buck Street, first call of the night, I pull a baby out of the bottom of a dumpster. I walk through the sewer every night. I don't want to come home and do it again with you.
Brooklyn accent, your accents appear to be easy for you, but the Brooklyn accent?
He's a guy from Queens, is an Italian Catholic from Queens who works in the Bronx, and so that's the accent. The easy thing to do is to kind of like water it down, and sometimes people get nervous about those accents, but I spent every day in the Bronx and hung out with those cops. That's how they sound.
It's the second time you've called me father.
Well, I was an altar boy at St. Ignatius. I was raised Catholic.
Past tense.
Yeah, I guess I outgrew all that.
What next for you? How do you approach work these days? You just get the scripts coming in and you're highly selective?
You don't really have that much control, I find, I in the sense that it talks to you. It's really obvious. I always know it's not the right thing to do if it's not grabbing me by the throat, and eventually they do. One of them jumps off the table and grabs you by the throat and says, this is what you're doing next. So until that happens, I just keep reading, and it's an interesting time, the last sort of 5 years in Hollywood, in the sense that there's a lot of great material that's not being made. So it's not as simple as finding good material. It's about finding good material that stands a chance of actually going into production.
And you still like going overseas to work?
I do. I actually really like it. I like it's like two completely different lives. I probably get to spend sort of 60-70% of my time at home in Australia and the rest of the time working. So I do like that disconnect. I don't know if I could handle it, sleeping in my own bed and going to play these characters every day. I think it's better to keep them separate. But if something came along, I'd certainly consider it. But I don't see it as my kind of nationalistic duty to be doing a lot of work here. I actually sometimes feel the opposite. I feel like it's great that other people get those opportunities.
I've just got a couple of non-acting ones for you. The Mighty Saints, it was only a couple of years ago we used to see you at all the grand finals that St Kilda was in. They're on the bottom of the ladder now. What's going on there?
Well, I've followed them since I was born, so I guess I'm kind of used to the up and down trajectory. It is what it is. I guess the beauty of the kind of cyclical nature of the draft and all that sort of stuff, I guess, prepares a lot of us supporters for that nature. You know, but if you barrack for a Hawthorn or a Geelong, they tend not to bottom out to that extent. They're very incredible clubs, but it is what it is. I'm actually I wouldn't say I'm getting as much enjoyment going every week watching us play now, but I am enjoying watching the young guys come up, and it's pretty exciting to see the guys get their first, 5 or 10 games and do something good with the ball. So fingers crossed.
Eric, congratulations on the movie.
Thanks
Good luck
very
with
much.
it. Good luck
Cheers.
with it. Whatever you do next, really
Thank you.
appreciate your time.